They had my car towed at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, without even bothering to ask what was under the cover. I came home from a business trip only to find a tow truck dragging away what they assumed was junk. And there she was, the HOA president, standing smugly with her arms crossed. That satisfied grin plastered across her face like she'd just done the neighborhood a favor. My neighbors watched from their windows. I died, like this was better than reality TV. The crunch of gravel echoed under my shoes as I stepped toward the empty driveway. Diesel fumes hung in the air, mixing with the manicured landscaping and the heavy stench of arrogance. They thought they knew what was hidden beneath that cover, but they were wrong, dead wrong, about the car, about me, and especially about who really owns this place. What would you do if your neighbors made assumptions about you? Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from Mond if you've ever dealt with an HOA from hell. Let me back up. My name is Ethan Ross. I'm 48, and 6 months ago my life was falling apart. After 20 years of marriage, I was stuck in the ugliest divorce imaginable, and my Jessica walked away with the mansion, half my retirement, and custody of our two teens who barely spoke to me anymore. Starting over in my late 40s wasn't easy. That's when I found a smaller place, a corner townhouse in Willowbrook Estates. A pristine community of 847 homes priced from $800,000 to $2.3 million. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone drove German cars, and the lawns looked too perfect to be real. The smell of fresh mulch hit you the moment you passed through. The gates, with the distant hum of leaf blowers and the yaps of overpriced designer dogs filling the air. But what truly sold me was the 3-car garage. See, I had inherited something that needed protection. My Uncle Harold had passed away the year before, leaving me his pride and joy, a 1969 Ferrari 275 GTB. On the surface, it looked worn, faded paint, cracked leather butt underneath. It was a numbers-matching museum-quality classic with 30 years of maintenance records, Uncle Harold always said. Real value hides in plain sight. Most people see what they expect to see, not what's actually there. Turns out, he left me more than just that car. But I'd learn that later at first. All I did was cover the Ferrari with a standard gray tarp while researching restoration shops. Nothing suspicious. Just a man protecting family history. That's when I met Victoria Ames. Picture the most stereotypical HOA president imaginable. BMW X7. Gym clothes that had never seen sweat, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Diane was 52, married to Eric Matthews, your classic pharmaceutical sales reapit to kids in private school, because, as she liked to say, public just isn't what it used to be. She'd been HOA president for 3 straight terms. And if I've learned one thing, it's that people who cling to small power usually do it because they can't handle anything bigger. Day 3, after moving in, there was a knock on my door. Diane stood there, flashing that polished but fake smile. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "Just wondering about that vehicle in your driveway." I explained it was a classic car, temporarily covered. Her smile tightened like a wire pulled too far, mem. "Well, we have standards here in Willowbrook. Have you reviewed the covenants?" She handed me an unofficial violation notice. Not legally binding, but intimidating enough. The cheap paper felt rough in my hand, and her overpowering perfume clung to the air like her arrogance that night. I read every word of the HOA documents, and guess what? No rule against covered vehicles at least not for the first 30 days. Diane was just testing me, seeing if I'd fold like her usual targets. But she wasn't finished. That very night, she started a neighborhood text chain. "New guy thinks the rules don't apply to him." Within days, I was getting the cold shoulder. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Whispers died mid-sentence as I approached. This wasn't about my car. This was about Diane trying to dominate the newcomer. What I didn't know yet was that Uncle Harold hadn't just left me a Ferrari. He'd left me something far bigger, something that would flip Diane's little power game upside down. But before that, she was about to escalate things to a whole new level. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter. Emergency HOA Board. Meeting, 48-hour notice. Location, Diane's house. It reeked of a power play home turf, stacked odds. The night of the meeting, I walked into her cookie-cutter colonial. Vanilla candles hit me before I even crossed the threshold. So strong you'd think she was masking something rotten. Eric Matthews answered the door with a beer in hand at 7 p.m. Classy. Inside. The board sat behind the kitchen island. Like a panel of judges, one chair waited for me, dead center. My footsteps echoed against the granite as I took my seat. Eric Matthews lingered in the background, ready to play backup. Diane slid a manila folder across the counter with theatrical flair. "We've received multiple complaints," she announced. Inside were screenshots, neighbor emails, even a flimsy property value study she probably Googled that afternoon. Property values are at risk. Children are asking questions. We have standards. She was turning my Ferrari into a neighborhood menace. But here's the thing about bullies. They assume everyone's unprepared. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my own folder. The HOA covenants highlighted and cross-referenced. The sharp slap of legal paper against granite silenced the room. "Show me the violation," I said. Her eyes flickered. The board members shifted nervously. I flipped to Section 4.27, covered vehicles permitted for up to 30 days. Section 6.1.3- requires written notice before proceedings. "Where's mine?" asked. Most residents never read these documents. But I had. And knowledge is power. One board member, Laura, cleared her throat. "Maybe we should table this pending review." Diane's face went crimson. Her intimidation tactic had just turned into a civics lesson, and she wasn't the teacher. "Fine," she snapped through gritted teeth. Tabled pending investigation, packed up, thanked them, and left. Victory, right? Not quite. The next morning, 3 piles of dog waste appeared on my lawn. An anonymous note arrived in my mailbox. "Trashy car for trashy people." And then came the real escalation. Later that day, I spotted Diane showing a house 2 streets over. At first, it seemed normal until I overheard her pitch. "Lovely neighborhood, though we do have some unfortunate new additions affecting the aesthetic." That's when it hit me. This wasn't about compliance. This was about money. Diane had been quietly running her own scheme, pushing out homeowners. She didn't like him cashing in on the turnover. My refusal to bow wasn't just challenging her authority, it was threatening her income. So, I did the only reasonable thing left. I went home and installed a full security system. Cameras on every angle, cloud backup, motion alerts, the work. Something told me Diane's next move would be worth recording. As I mounted the new cameras around my house, my thoughts kept drifting. Back to Uncle Harold. He was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. What if he'd anticipated something like this? What if that Ferrari wasn't the only thing he left behind? That evening, I dug deeper into his old files. And buried inside a folder labeled Willowbrook Development, 1989, I found something that made me drop into my chair. Turns out Uncle Harold hadn't just bought a car in 1969, he had also been knee-deep in real estate. It's much deeper than I'd ever imagined. And this little twist was about to change everything. Victoria Ames had no idea she'd picked a fight with the wrong person. But Diane wasn't one to back down. Within 48 hours of her last embarrassment, she shifted tactics from legal threats to psychological warfare. First, she organized a neighborhood safety meeting. Everyone was invited to except me. I only discovered it through my security cameras, watching groups of neighbors file past my house in silence, clutching identical flyers like mourners at a funeral. Their footsteps crunched on my driveway gravel, sharp and judgmental. The next morning, a petition showed up, clarifying vehicle standards. 23 signatures by noon. Eric Matthews, suddenly Mr. Social, was out during dog walks, casually warning other husbands that unclear rules could hurt property values. Meanwhile, the sound of garage doors slamming every time I drove by became my new neighborhood theme song, but Diane's real masterstroke. She set up another informal chat. This time she brought in her so-called legal muscle, her brother-in-law. Jason, I say so-called because nothing about Jason screamed lawyer, or like strip mall legal aid trying to cosplay corporate counsel. He cornered me at my mailbox one Thursday evening. His discount suit fit like a burlap sack. His briefcase was held together with duct tape. He was practicing his serious lawyer face in the reflection of my car. Ethan Ross. Diane began, voice dripping with fake concern. We need to discuss liability issues your vehicle creates. Jason cleared his throat like he was about to recite the Constitution. Multiple residents have expressed safety concerns about unknown vehicle contents. Potential homeowner insurance implications could impact the entire community. The smell of his cheap cologne mixed with Diane's desperation. It was nauseating. Behind us, kids were laughing in their backyards, innocent voices cutting through the absurdity of this legal theater at my curb. 72 hours to remove that cover. Jason continued, pulling out an official-looking document that was clearly a Google template, or face legal action to protect community standards. Here's something most people don't know. Anyone can claim to represent an HOA, but actual authority requires formal board authorization. It's always demand proof because most legal threats are just expensive letterhead wrapped around hot air. So, I did what any decent strategist would do. Research. Jason Kowalski, Esquire. Specialty. DUI defense and cut-rate real estate closings. His reviews, 2.5 stars. Missed court dates, unreturned calls, clients calling him unreliable. And most importantly, he had zero standing with our HOA. He wasn't authorized to represent anyone, so I contacted the real HOA attorney listed in my purchase documents. And here's the plot twist. Jason's opinion was worth exactly what I'd paid for it, nothing. Friday evening, I showed up at Diane's door. This time, I wasn't alone. I had the real HOA attorney, Maria Gonzalez, on speakerphone. The doorbell felt different under my finger. I wasn't the one being intimidated anymore, Diane answered with her polished smile, but I caught the flicker of panic behind her eyes. Diane, I said calmly, we need to discuss your brother-in-law's unauthorized practice of law. I don't understand what you, she began. Maria's voice cut through the speaker. Miss Blackwell, legal representation requires explicit board authorization through my firm. Mr. Kowalski has no standing to issue demands or threats. Watching Diane's face crumble was like watching a slow-motion demolition. Eric Matthews appeared behind her, keys jingling nervously in his pocket. And that's when I spotted something on their kitchen counter foreclosure notices. Suddenly, it all clicked. No, this wasn't about community standards. Diane was drowning financially. Her HOA president's stipend might have been their only steady income. My resistance didn't just challenge her power, it threatened her survival. This is harassment, she sputtered, shifting into victim mode. You're trying to destroy our community, protecting it from fake legal threats, I replied. I'll need a written apology for the harassment by Sunday, or this goes to the state bar. The door slammed. But it wasn't anger I heard, it was desperation. That weekend, cracks began to show. 3 board members reached out privately. 2 neighbors stopped by with awkward apologies. And someone launched an anonymous social media account called Willowbrook Truth, exposing the board's overreach. Diane's power structure was starting to fracture. But desperation makes people dangerous. And I could smell it in the air, the acrid scent of someone cornered. Monday morning proved me right. An emergency board meeting notice landed in my mailbox just 24 hours. No notice. Already a violation of the bylaws, which required 72 hours. Minimum. But desperate people don't care about rules they've been breaking all along. The agenda was simple. Amend community standards regarding vehicle storage and remove disruptive residents. She was going nuclear. Planning to rewrite the rules retroactively to make my Ferrari a violation, kick me out entirely? Her desperation was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. And here's where her genius really showed. She'd stacked the deck with proxy votes. It's not real residents, but clients from her real estate business, and friends holding powers of attorney. She was about to pack the room with fake votes and ram through her amendments. But she didn't know I'd been doing my own homework. I cross-referenced her attendee list with county property records, ownership databases, and HOA rolls. The texture. of those pages in my hands felt like evidence, and that's exactly what they were. Meeting night felt like walking into a staged execution. Diane had filled the community center with her army of fake residents. 67% attendance, she announced proudly. Except only 34% were legitimate, standing at the front like she was accepting an award. Diane launched into her PowerPoint presentation. All vehicles must be visible and identifiable at all times, she declared. Daily fines of $50 for non-compliance, effective immediately. Her laser pointer clicked against the projection screen, each sound like nails on a chalkboard. Behind me, I heard Eric Matthews whispering, coaching people on how to vote. This amendment will ensure our community maintains the standards that protect property values. Diane continued, dramatically gesturing to photos of my covered Ferrari. I sat quietly in the back, phone recording, notes piling up. Virginia's a one-party consent state. In case you're wondering, Diane's confidence grew with every nod from her stacked audience. She actually thought she'd already won. Here's a little knowledge nugget most people don't know. HOA proxy. Votes must come from verified residents who can't attend in person, not random people doing favors for board members. Always demand verification. Illegitimate proxy votes can invalidate an entire meeting, along with every decision made. When it came time for the vote, Diane's smile could have lit up Las Vegas. 23 votes in favor, 8 opposed. Amendment passes. Effective immediately, she announced, practically glowing. My daily $50 fine would start tomorrow unless I removed the car cover. Any other business? She asked, surveying the room like a queen presiding over her kingdom. I stood up slowly, my chair creaking in the silence. I'd like a copy of the official vote tally and attendee verification list. Her smile flickered. That's not necessary. Actually, it is, I replied. I'll need to verify voting eligibility with county records as required by state HOA oversight regulations. Nervous shuffling filled the room. Several of her so-called proxy voters suddenly became very interested in their phones. And in that moment, I could smell the fear mixing with the industrial carpet odor of the community center. Motion to adjourn. Eric Matthews called out quickly, "Too late, buddy." That night I cross-checked every attendee's address against county. Records the results were devastating. 11 people who voted didn't even live in Willowbrook Estates. 3 more were Diane's relatives. Using their parents' old addresses, the amendment vote wasn't just questionable, it was outright fraudulent. But Diane wasn't done. Thursday morning, I found an official violation notice under my door. Demand for immediate cover removal, a $200 administrative fee, and daily $50 fine starting in 48 hours. To top it off, towing authorization if my vehicle remained non-dash compliant. She had just handed me a smoking gun that day. I compiled my evidence packet: fraudulent voting records, unauthorized proxies, bylaw violations, and a detailed harassment timeline. Everything carefully organized and ready for submission to the State HOA Oversight Board. I also called Angela Torres, Channel 7 investigative reporter known for exposing HOA abuse. Let's just say she was very interested in a story about proxy vote fraud and board member embezzlement. But I held back, because while assembling the evidence, I kept thinking about that file folder from Uncle Harold's papers. Willowbrook. Development, 1989. Time to see what other surprises he had left me that Friday night. I poured a glass of bourbon, put on my reading glasses, and opened the folder. What I found made me set the glass down carefully and read everything twice. Uncle Harold hadn't just bought a Ferrari in 1969. He'd been playing a much longer game. The documents were crisp, professional, and absolutely mind-blowing. Meridian Holdings LLC, incorporated in Delaware in 1985. Primary asset: 847 acres of Fairfax County farmland purchased in 1989 for $340,000. Development partner Willowbrook Construction Group. Total project investment $78 million. Uncle Harold's ownership stake 67%, as I read. The faint smell of tobacco and leather from his old briefcase mixed with my bourbon. And suddenly, everything made sense. The Ferrari was never the real inheritance. It was Bateman to draw me deeper. Cross-referencing the corporate filings with my property deed revealed something that made my hands shake. Every single homeowner in Willowbrook Estates, including Victoria, Alms was technically my tenant. Uncle Harold had structured the community as a ground lease. Homeowners bought their houses, but the land underneath every street, every common area, every lot belonged to Meridian Holdings to me. Their HOA fees weren't just fees, they included lease payments, flowing directly into Meridian's accounts. And for the past 18 months, $127,000 per month had been quietly deposited into Uncle Harold's old business account. I logged in. $2.3 million, untouched, just sitting there earning interest. Diane's embezzlement? She hadn't been stealing from the HOA. She'd been stealing from my company, and the legal reality was even more devastating. The HOA had no authority over landowner rights. Every vote, every fine, every threat Diane had issued was meaningless. It could terminate leases, restrict access to common areas, even control utility easements. I called Maria Gonzalez, Uncle Harold's estate attorney who had been quietly managing Meridian Holdings all these years. Her voice carried a smile. Your uncle always said this day would come. He knew someone would eventually challenge your right to live peacefully here. He wanted you to learn patience firsthand, then use power wisely. Emotional weight hit me like a truck. Uncle Harold had orchestrated this entire lesson. He knew an upscale community would eventually draw small-minded bullies like Diane. The Ferrari wasn't just a gift, it was a test, Maria continued. Victoria Ames has been harassing her own landlord while embezzling from his company. That gives us grounds for immediate lease termination under Section 12. One phone call, and Diane would face a forced sale of her house at a massive loss. But tucked behind the corporate documents was a handwritten note from Uncle Harold. Some people respect power. Others respect justice. Use wisely. The irony was delicious. Diane had spent months fighting for control over property she didn't own, wielding authority she never had while stealing from the very person she was trying to intimidate. But now, I faced a choice: swift revenge, or a lesson that could change the entire community. The question wasn't whether I had power. It was how to use it. Saturday morning, my kitchen counter looked like a war room file spread out, coffee steaming, the past colliding with the present. Time to assemble my team. First recruit, Maria Gonzalez, estate attorney and secret weapon. She arrived at noon with a steel-edged smile and a briefcase full of termination procedures. Your uncle would be proud, she said. We have clear grounds for action. Second recruit, Detective Jake Morrison, my neighbor 3 doors down. Retired Fairfax County, now watching Diane's games with professional interest. I've been documenting her harassment pattern, he said, pulling out a composition notebook filled with timestamps, witness accounts, and photos. His careful handwriting felt like justice taking shape. Third recruit, Sarah Chen, forensic accountant, and my former tech colleague. She arrived with her laptop and that sharp grin she always got when she smelled fraud. HOA embezzlement is my specialty, she said. Give me 24 hours. By Sunday evening, we were back around my kitchen table. Sarah's spreadsheets painted a damning picture. Systematic theft, fake consulting fees, kickbacks from contractors, inflated maintenance costs. Her conclusion was simple: total embezzlement. $94,000 over 2 years. Jake slid his folder across the table. Evidence stacked on evidence. Diane had no idea the storm that was about to hit. The harassment had escalated first. It was insults, then property damage, and now false legal threats. Any prosecutor would call this organized intimidation. Maria tapped her pen against the lease termination documents. Under ground lease law, harassment of the landowner is a violation. Normally a 30-day notice is required, but with a documented pattern like this, we could move faster. That's when Uncle Harold's brilliance really showed. I pulled out Tommy Reeves's appraisal report. Tommy, a certified classic car expert with 40 years of experience, had authenticated my Ferrari. At auction, it was worth over $2.1 million. The original invoice from 1969 showed my uncle paid just $11,400. He had hidden a masterpiece in plain sight, letting everyone assume it was junk. The psychological power of that move was genius. Diane thought she was fighting trash, never realizing she was trying to destroy something more valuable than most people's homes. Here's a knowledge nugget. It can save you thousands. Ground. Lease agreements give landowners ultimate authority over tenants. Even in HOA communities, most residents don't realize they're actually renting the land beneath their homes. Maria laid out the legal strategy. Phase 1. Reveal the car during her next harassment attempt. Phase 2. Present the financial evidence to the board. Phase 3. Disclose ownership at a community meeting. Phase 4. Involve the media if she refused to stop. Meanwhile, Jake set up additional surveillance, cameras covering every angle, body-worn recorders, encrypted backups. We would document everything. The neighborhood intelligence network was already paying off. 3 residents had quietly contacted me about Diane's harassment campaigns. Jake noticed a pattern. She targeted anyone who didn't fit her narrow vision of acceptable neighbors, pushing them out through intimidation. Sarah's financial analysis showed the leverage I now controlled. Land ownership, utility easements, access rights, HOA funding sources. You don't just own the land, she explained. You control the infrastructure this community depends on. Another knowledge nugget. Most HOA disputes can be resolved by uncovering who truly owns the property beneath the homes. Many residents never realize the power dynamic. Tommy returned with the final piece. Full Ferrari restoration, documents matching numbers, original paint codes, service records spanning 50 years. Museum quality, he confirmed. My uncle had preserved it perfectly. The media angle was ready to... Angela Torres from Channel 7 was interested, but timing was everything. HOA president embezzling funds while harassing the landowner. That's primetime news. Maria mused, but preparation was just as important as strategy. With Maria's coaching, I practiced calmly revealing ownership, rehearsed Diane's possible reactions, and prepared for retaliation. I understood every legal lever I could pull: control of water rights, sewer access, road maintenance, landscaping contracts. Once the landowner asserted authority, the HOA's power collapsed. By Sunday evening, our battle plan was set. Maria would draft violation notices. Jake would manage surveillance. Sarah would finalize financial presentations. Tommy would stage the Ferrari reveal. As we shuffled papers into place, I realized Uncle Harold hadn't just left me an inheritance, he'd left me the tools to demand respect, deliver justice, and teach a community about consequences. Phase 1 would begin with Diane's next move, and knowing her, it wouldn't take long. Sure enough, at 5:47 a.m. Tuesday, Diane's desperation hit a new low. I woke to the rumble of a diesel engine and the whine of a tow truck reversing into my driveway. Through the window, I saw her directing the operation like some suburban general. Eric Matthews filmed on his phone for evidence. The tow operator, a large man who'd probably seen every kind of car dispute, approached my covered Ferrari cautiously. I slipped into my robe, grabbed my coffee, and walked outside as if checking the paper. Jake was already filming from his porch, old cop instincts in play. "Morning, folks," I called cheerfully. "Beautiful day for attempted grand theft auto." The tow operator froze. "Sir, I have HOA authorization. May I show you the order?" He handed me a flimsy paper signed by Diane, claiming the car was abandoned and unsafe. It was nothing like the ironclad legal documents I'd been dealing with. Diane emerged from Eric Matthews' car, clipboard raised like a weapon. "Finally enforcing community standards, Ethan Ross," she shouted, her voice shrill with imagined victory. "Daily. Fines total $350, plus towing fees." Should have listened. Neighbors' garage doors opened one after another. Mrs. Patterson, the Martinez family, even the teenagers came out. The whole neighborhood was gathering for the show. Before they towed anything, I said calmly, "Maybe you'd like to see what you're removing." I walked to the car, placed my hand on the cover, Since you're so concerned about property values. The crowd hushed. Kids leaned forward. Phones came out. What's under there, Ethan Ross? Little Sarah Martinez asked. Why don't we find out together? I pulled the cover off in one motion. Gasps rippled through the crowd as sunlight hit the Ferrari's blazing red paint. Chrome wheels gleamed. Every line screamed perfection. The tow operator whistled. That's a real Ferrari. Diane's face twisted from confusion to shock to rage. Eric Matthews stopped filming, his phone dropping to his side. Neighbors who had ignored me for weeks now stared in awe. It's beautiful, Sarah Martinez breathed. How much is it worth? I produced Tommy's paperwork with perfect timing, about $2.1 million. The tow operator backed away, hands raised. I'm not touching a $2 million car. You didn't tell me this was a classic Ferrari. But Diane, refusing to see the cliff she stood on, snapped. Doesn't matter what it's worth. Rules apply to everyone. The crowd's energy shifted instantly. Sympathy evaporated. Eric Matthews tugged at her arm, but she wouldn't stop. Anyone else think this looks like junk? I asked. Nervous laughter broke out. Kids begged their parents to touch the car. Diane stood alone, authority slipping through her fingers. Then I dropped the real bombshell. Diane, there's something else you should know. I pulled out my phone. Been trying to tow your landlord's car? Her face froze. What? I own the land under your house, I said, showing her notarized corporate documents. Every HOA payment you've made includes rent to my company, Meridian Holdings. You've been harassing your own landlord while stealing from me. The shock in her eyes was almost worth the 18 months of torment. Eric Matthews went pale as the crowd murmured, phones buzzing with Google searches. That's impossible, she whispered. Not at all, I replied. My uncle left me controlling ownership of 67% of the land beneath this community. Your embezzlement scheme? You've been stealing from me? The tow truck rolled away. Neighbors apologized, inspected the Ferrari, and distanced themselves from Diane. Social media exploded. Jake's footage hit the Willowbrook Truth account within minutes, but I could smell danger like an animal cornered. Diane was ready to strike again. Sure enough, by 6 p.m. she'd plastered emergency board meeting notices on every door. Her agenda? Remove fraudulent residents and sue anyone hurting property values. She'd gone nuclear, accusing me of deceiving the community and committing fraud. Her desperation was so thick you could almost taste it. And this time, she wasn't just trying to evict me. She wanted to destroy my reputation. Her real estate contacts spread gossip like wildfire, calling me a con artist, a criminal, even a tax cheat. But Sarah's forensic accounting revealed the truth. Diane herself was 3 months behind on her mortgage, facing foreclosure and watching her real estate business collapse. This wasn't about HOA compliance anymore. This was about survival. Wednesday evening's emergency meeting felt like walking straight into an ambush. Diane had reserved the community center and filled it with her loyal supporters. Eric Matthews looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Jason, the fake lawyer, was already sweating through his polyester suit. 2 other board loyalists sat stiffly, still buying into her propaganda. The smell of industrial carpet, mixed with cheap coffee and tension, made the place reek of suburban warfare. Out in the parking lot, Angela Torres from Channel 7 just happened to be waiting with her news crew, tipped off by someone who definitely wasn't me. Diane opened the meeting with a fiery speech, complete with a PowerPoint presentation. Photos of my Ferrari, screenshots of property records, a carefully cropped timeline of supposed deceptive behavior. Each click of her laser pointer sounded like a countdown to her own downfall. Ethan Ross Reynolds has been posing as a resident while running a real estate scam, she declared, voice dripping with false authority. Jason stood up, holding his legal pad like he was about to cross-examine a criminal. We have evidence of fraudulent property claims and possible identity theft. The board moves to revoke his residency eligibility pending investigation. I sat quietly in the back with Maria, both of us taking notes as Diane built her own noose. The crowd muttered, sending uneasy glances my way. Mob mentality was spreading. Diane's voice rose with confidence. Any resident committing fraud forfeits the right to live here. Tonight we vote on removal. That's when I stood, letting the metal chair scrape across the floor like nails on a chalkboard. Diane, I said calmly, before you call the police on your landlord, maybe you should see the complete financial records. Maria opened her briefcase with deliberate precision, pulling out Sarah's forensic analysis. The shuffle of official documents cut the tension like a knife. Ladies and gentlemen, said Turn into the room, here's the truth. I present evidence of systematic embezzlement by your HOA president. Sarah's spreadsheets lit up. The screen, replacing Diane's propaganda. Fake consulting payments. Inflated contracts, kickback arrangements all documented with bank records and filings. $94,000 stolen over 2 years. I continued, from Meridian Holdings, the company that owns 67% of the land your houses sit on. The room shifted as if a wave had passed through it. Diane went pale, her credibility shattering in real time. Then Jason made his fatal mistake. This is all fabricated. Ethan Ross doesn't own anything here. Maria rose to her feet, her voice calm but commanding. Maria Gonzalez, a state attorney for Meridian Holdings LLC. Here are certified ownership documents, ground lease agreements, and state filings. Papers spread across the room. Neighbors flipped through their own deeds, whispering about payments they'd never understood. The horrifying realization dawned. They had been watching their landlord get harassed for months, motion for no confidence in the current president. Laura from the board called out, seconded. Came 3 more voices. Eric Matthews dragged Diane toward the exit as Channel 7's cameras rolled. This isn't over, she screeched. We'll sue everyone. The door slammed behind her, but the damage was done. The vote followed swiftly, 51 in favor of her removal. Eric Matthews abstaining since he was already outside. Within days, a new election was scheduled. Stolen funds were set to be reimbursed. Media coverage triggered an investigation into Diane's real estate license. And for the first time, the scent of justice filled the air. 3 weeks later, the community healing meeting carried the energy of a small-town election. I pulled up to the center in the Ferrari now, a neighborhood celebrity. The deep purr of the V12 engine drew kids to the windows like moths to a flame. Angela Torres and her Channel 7 crew returned for the follow-up story. Cameras rolled as residents crowded inside, the atmosphere buzzing with nervous energy and the smell of fresh coffee. Diane was nowhere to be seen. A bright red for sale sign stood in her yard of foreclosure waiting to happen. Eric Matthews had vanished too, probably preparing his just following orders defense for an upcoming divorce attorney. The meeting opened with Sarah Martinez, our new HOA president, the kindergarten teacher everyone trusted. Her wooden gavel echoed like justice itself. First order of business. She said, transparent governance to prevent future abuses. Jake Morrison, retired detective, took his oath as security liaison, bringing instant credibility to the new board. The contrast with Diane's self-serving rule couldn't have been more obvious. When Sarah called me to the podium, the wood under my hands felt nothing like the intimidation of Diane's kitchen table. This was different. This was respect. 3 weeks ago, I began, my voice steady. We learned how dangerous assumptions can be. The crowd fell silent, kids on laps, teens off their phones, neighbors leaning in. My Uncle Harold left me more than land in a car. He left me a lesson in patience, letting people reveal their true character before passing judgment. That had once looked at me with suspicion, now reflected respect. Even apology. Today, I continued. I'm announcing the Harold Chen Memorial Fund, honoring my uncle's full name. $2.3 million in accumulated ground lease funds will create annual scholarships for local students pursuing engineering and business. The applause built like a wave, rolling through the room. Angela's cameraman caught every reaction. $50,000 a year, overseen by an elected committee. Our first recipient? Jake Morrison's granddaughter, studying mechanical engineering. Jake's eyes filled with tears as the community gave him a standing ovation. Chairs scraped, hands clapped, and hope filled the air. But I wasn't done. We're also establishing a community improvement fund, new playground equipment, organic gardens for food donations, and an annual classic car show to raise money for local charities. The applause swelled again. I raised a hand for the finale, and because actions should have consequences. From now on, we'll have mandatory financial transparency monthly reports, open books, and independent audits. This will never happen again. Here's your knowledge nugget. In HOA disputes, document everything. Video, audio, financial records. They're not just legal tools, they're the foundation for rebuilding trust. Angela Torres stepped forward for her final question. Ethan Ross, how does it feel to turn conflict into community benefit? Smiled. My uncle always said, real wealth isn't what you own. It's knowing who you can trust. And this community just proved it can be trusted. Outside, the Ferrari gleamed in the parking lot, no longer a symbol of conflict, but of transformation. Kids lined up for a turn in the driver's seat while parents shared their own HOA nightmares. The irony was beautiful. Diane's harassment backfired so completely. It sparked reforms now being studied by developers across the region. As the meeting ended, neighbors came forward with stories they had been too afraid to share. Her pattern of intimidation targeting anyone didn't fit her narrow vision was finally exposed and destroyed. The victory wasn't just legal. It was emotional, communal, and deeply human. Children's laughter filled the air as my Ferrari's engine roared during spontaneous neighborhood celebrations. The smoky sweetness of barbecue drifted across the crowd, mingling with warm handshakes and genuine hugs from people who had shunned me just weeks earlier. Justice had been served, and in its place came something even stronger, healing. Exactly what Uncle Harold would have wanted. The golden sunset reflecting off perfectly polished chrome told me the story was finally finding its right ending. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates appeared on the cover of Virginia Living magazine as a model HOA community. Property values had climbed by 12%. Resident satisfaction was at an all-time high. And my Ferrari had become a community icon, rolling into regional car shows to raise money for local charities. The Harold Chen Memorial Fund had already changed lives. That May, 5 local students received scholarships to pursue engineering and business degrees. Jake Morrison's granddaughter led the group, stepping proudly onto the Virginia Tech stage to accept her award. Watching her smile as she held the check, I could almost feel Uncle Harold's presence. His approval carried on the scent of fresh flowers and the promise of new beginnings. The community garden project blossomed into something beautiful. Residents growing fresh vegetables for the food bank, children learning where their food truly came from, and neighbors bonding through collaboration instead of conflict. Laughter, while picking tomatoes, replaced the slammed doors and whispered complaints of Diane's reign. As for Diane, she eventually moved to North Carolina, where real estate licensing rules seemed more forgiving. Her marriage barely survived, and Eric Matthews found steady work in medical device sales. Every so often, an anonymous donation arrives for the scholarship fund, and I can't help but suspect its source. Redemption takes many shapes. My own life found balance, too. Sarah Martinez and I began dating after the dust settled slowly. Naturally, just 2 adults realizing they enjoyed each other's company during community planning sessions. Her kids approved, which meant more than I ever expected. The Ferrari's restoration reached museum quality, valued at $2.4 million by Tommy's latest appraisal, but its real worth was symbolic. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was a beacon of transformation, just as Uncle Harold had envisioned. Here's the final knowledge nugget I'll leave you with. Always research property ownership history before buying into an HOA community. You might uncover rights, responsibilities, or opportunities that change everything. The ripple effects of our story stretched further than I ever dreamed. Angela Torres won a regional Emmy for her investigative series on HOA abuse, and our battle became a case study in journalism schools for uncovering human stories hidden in local politics. 3 other communities reached out to me for guidance on similar disputes, proof that HOA misuse of power is far more common than people like to admit. Maria's law firm now specializes in property rights cases, Uncovering hidden ownership, stakes for others. Jake launched a thriving security consulting business for homeowners associations. Sarah expanded her accounting practice to include HOA audits. Everyone discovered new purpose in the wake of the conflict. The broader social impact was staggering. Our annual car show now attracts hundreds of visitors. It's raising more than $75,000 last year for homeless services and food banks. The neighborhood festival grew into a 5-community collaboration, breaking down suburban barriers and building bridges across property lines. But the most rewarding change? Monthly HOA meetings where residents actually participate. Transparent budgets, collaborative decision-making, and neighbors working together instead of tearing each other apart. We transformed from Diane's dictatorship into a working democracy, proving small-scale governance can succeed when people value fairness over power. The personal healing surprised me most. My teenagers started respecting me again, not just as a parent, but as someone who stood up for principles instead of grumbling about problems. They now spend equal time at both homes. And even my Jessica admits grudgingly that I've grown. Uncle Harold's wisdom has fully taken root in my life. Patience over impulse, preparation over anger, justice over revenge. I still keep the letter he left in the Ferrari's glove box. It ends with a simple truth. Real victory improves everyone's situation. The sensory conclusion feels complete. The Ferrari's engine purrs beneath me as I drive towards speaking. Engagements. Fresh flowers bloom in the community garden. The steering wheel feels smooth under my hands as I navigate toward new chapters. In the rearview mirror, I see grateful neighbors waving, but the open road ahead holds more promise than the past ever could. So here's my challenge to you. What's your HOA horror story? Share it in the comments below. You never know who your story might help. If this journey opened your eyes to property rights, or gave you hope that justice can triumph over petty power, don't forget to subscribe. Next week, we'll dive into another David versus Goliath tale. The woman who discovered her subdivision's pool actually belonged to her grandmother's estate. Trust me, you'll want to hear how that unfolds. Remember this, knowledge is power, but patience is strategy. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's living well. It's in helping your community rise with you. The sound of the Ferrari's engine echoing across neighborhoods no longer signals conflict, but transformation. Uncle Harold would be proud. Another HOA battle closed, another community healed. If this story made you smile, shake your head, or pump your fist, hit that like button. Share your own HOA experiences and subscribe so you never miss another chapter in this saga.